proposing too early can wind up in disaster. And you definitely don't want to propose too late. So let's take a look at the typical sales timeline. At the far left, you can see that we start with an inquiry. And this inquiry can happen on both ends. Either the client reaches out to you or you reach out to the client. But what happens here is that your company and their company connect in some way. So it could be they visit your website and then they reach out using your contact form, or maybe you run into them at a trade show. Somehow a connection is made. Then a whole bunch of things happen, and then you arrive at the far right and you start working on their project. So let's demystify what happens in between. The first thing that needs to happen is you need to qualify the lead. So once you're connected with this person, we have to make sure that 4 things are in place. And those 4 things are, do they have a problem that you can solve? So obviously, if somebody's looking to have plumbing fixed, we may or may not be the right fit. You also want to make sure that they can afford your services. So budget is a very important part in qualifying your leads. Then you want to make sure that they have a timeline of needs, some sort of deadline in place. The worst is when you're talking to a lead and they're like, yeah, we want to make a new website, we need to rebrand, we need a marketing campaign, but we're not really sure when we want to do this, maybe next quarter, maybe 2022. That's should be a red flag and you should run or try and get them nailed down. You want to make sure that they have a timeline of need. And then obviously you need to have a desire to work together. And this goes both ways. Like, they have to want to work with you and you have to want to work with them. Make sure that, there's a desire to work with each other, both on a ethical level, but also on a personal level. Like, if this client is already a pain, do you want to continue that with a paid relationship? So what happens in between the inquiry and the qualification is really different for every job. We've qualified leads during the first call ever with us. You bump into somebody at the trade show, you can qualify them right there at the spot. But I've also nurtured a relationship, 10, 15 calls, meetings, lunches, before they became a qualified lead. It all depends on really who you're dealing with. So what happens in between these 2 points is it's kind of like a bunch of stuff. Side note, overall, I have noticed that the entire sales process kind of increases in proportion with the budget involved. And what it boils down to is, like, if there's a bigger budget, there's going to be a longer sales cycle. The $250,000 logo job that we did in 2017, that took 6 months to close. So you it's to be expected that these sales cycles are going to expand and contract with the budget. All right, so let's say you had the meetings, you qualified the lead, you have a good idea of what their budget is, and they have a reasonable idea of what you're going to charge them. Actually, before I move on, this is crucially important. Make sure that you talk about price before you put together a proposal. And that means on the phone with the client, you're going to look for them to agree on at least a price range. Even if they can't commit to the project in the meeting, even if they say, we don't know if we're going to move forward with you, you want to have a good understanding of what their budget is and if it matches your costs. Now, I know a lot of you are like, no, I don't want to do that, but it's true. Talking about price with the client on the phone is an essential part of this process. Otherwise, you're just guessing, and you don't want to guess. If it's uncomfortable to talk about money, practice. Practice with your mom, practice with your wife or your husband or your kids. Practice saying the words until it becomes muscle memory. But also it just helps to ask them, say, hey, typically in the past, I've seen these projects between $20,000 and $5,000. Does that range work for you? And you can measure the client's budget there. All right. So once the lead is qualified and once you have kind of a verbal agreement on what the budget would be if they went with you, then we're ready to send the proposal. But there's one step in between sending a proposal and beginning the project that a lot of people forget, and that's having a signed contract. Okay, remember this GIF? Well, I guess she eventually said yes to the proposal, but just because they agreed to get married doesn't make them married. They still need to get the marriage license signed. They still need to go through the wedding. There's things that need to happen before they're actually husband and wife. Well, in my opinion, creative projects are the same way. We need to establish the relationship before getting to work. And that's why you'll notice that there is nothing for the client to sign in this proposal template, right? All right, so what's the difference between a proposal and a contract? Proposals are for sales and negotiating. Contracts are legally binding agreements. Now, I strongly recommend using a contract for every big project. Let's take a look at what's covered in each document to see why. Inside of a proposal, you've got your basic company info, the problem summary, project cost, project timeline, and a process snapshot. This document is pretty. It's put together nicely. It's meant to impress. It's a sales tool. When we compare this with a contract, it's very different. A contract includes detailed company info, an offer term, how long is this offer good for? A change policy, what happens if the client wants to change the contract? Client responsibilities, what are they going to bring to the table? A right to reproduce, this is huge, guys. A right to reproduce is massive. This is permission to display the work in your portfolio. And that's important, especially when you're dealing with bigger clients. It establishes a legal relationship. Warranties, like what are you guaranteeing out of this? Liability. If something goes wrong and somebody gets sued, what's going to happen? Who's liable for this? It also covers dispute resolution. So what happens if you guys are at odds? Who settles this? Termination clause. How do we get out of the project altogether? Intellectual property. Who owns the thing once it's made? Does the client own it, or are you licensing it to them? Intellectual property is something that we skip every single time, and it's so massive. And a good contract will cover that. And then you get into the nitty-gritty details, like the scope of work, the fees and expenses, payment terms, like the important stuff that's going to really impact your business. Now, a contract is enforceable, but I highly doubt you're going to take one of your clients to court. You know, most of us do a good job and most clients hold up their end of the bargain. But if you don't have a contract, when are you going to have a conversation on these things? Like, how many rounds of revisions are they limited to? How will they even know that's like the revision cycle is important to you? And then how are you going to know who owns what when things are done? So I hope that helps. I hope you guys enjoyed this little peek inside the perfect proposal. I would actually love to hear what you thought about the entire process and any other questions that you have about sending proposals to clients. So let me know in the comments section below. Now, obviously you can build proposals on your own, and if money is tight, especially with everything going on in the world right now, I'd recommend doing just that. But if you want a shortcut to a great proposal, I'd love to invite you to check out the perfect proposal. I actually just updated it. It has been completely redesigned from the ground up and includes a bunch of bonuses, both past and new ones, like copy written for you, a one-page proposal template, and then full versions of this webinar and more. So if you're into it, the link is in the description below. As always, guys, thank you for tuning in. Please do us a favor and demolish that like button. Subscribe if you're not already, and remember, you got this. We love you, and we'll see you next time.